Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the Uncanny X-Men number 294, cover dated November 1992. And this is part one of X-Cutioner's Song, a 12-part X-over crossover across the four main X titles. So part one is Uncanny X-Men, part two X-Factor, Part 3, X-Men, Adjectiveless X-Men, and Part 4, X-Force. So running for 3 months in the autumn of 1992. And the first formal crossover on the X title since Extinction Agenda back in 1990. So this all of these books came polybagged with a card, Skybox card. So you can see it here on the right. So the first one features Professor X, and he is designated prey. And if I turn this over, you'll see that there's text here from Strife's strike file. And we've got Strife himself talking, "What will it be then, Charles? Are you to be the caring grandfather, rocking your charges with gentility and ease," and so on and so forth. In the last section there, "Now let the ensuing explosion rock both heaven and hell, both yesterday and tomorrow." So these cards produced by Skybox, and as I said, every issue came with one of these cards in the polybag. So let's take this away and focus on our main event, which is the comic itself. So the cover here by Brandon Peterson, and longtime X-Men inker, well, back in the John Byrne era, Terry Austin returning to the title. Interesting the effect that Austin's return makes on Peterson's art, evoking both the John Byrne era and those collaborations of Austin with Arthur Adams as well, Art Adams. So I like this cover. It's pretty dramatic, good rendition of Cable. Let's open it up and see what we have as our splash page inside. So nice splash page too. We've got Warren Worthington using an image transducer here to render his blue skin back to its original hue with a bunch of flowers here, and he is welcoming his date for a limo ride, as it turns out, to Central Park and a rock concert by Lila Cheney. And we've got Brandon Peterson here, pretty pleased with himself, including his signature on this particular page too. So who is his date? Well, it turns out it's Charlotte Jones, last seen in X-Factor number 68. So Lobdell here drawing on, obviously he's reading up on continuity, both in the X-Men title and also X-Factor. So Charlotte here is pretty nonplussed that Warren Worthington is white again. But Warren has been given a new lease on life by Jean Grey's pep talk with him, tough talking really with him in the previous issue 293, where she told him, "Look, Apocalypse may have given you these adamantium wings and changed your complexion, but you have always been in control." So Warren now getting back to his old self and swooping in there for a kiss and telling his driver James to drive to the park. "Very good, sir," says James here. "You can say that again, James," says Warren in reply. Nice artwork here by Brandon Peterson. And then we switch to Central Park, New York City, Manhattan. And we've got Bishop and Rogue here on security duty, as it turns out. And a little reference to a bit of friction between them, going back to Adjectiveless X-Men number 8, where Bishop's aggro with Gambit resulted in the ruin of Rogue's berry pie. And so Bishop kind of asks, "Why do I get the impression you're still angry about that blueberry pie incident?" And she responds, "Please, I'm above that sort of thing. I don't even know what you're going on about." But here she whispers, sides, "It was a boysenberry pie." So then we've got Lila Cheney here, last seen in Jim Lee's final issues, where she was porting the X-Men to Mojo World, to and from Mojo World. So she's getting ready to go out on stage. And Charles Xavier, Professor X, is there in his wheelchair. And she asks him, are you sure the masses are ready for this? So what's Professor X doing there at the rock concert? And by the way, Bishop says there's 75,000 people there in Central Park. So Professor X says, ready to listen to the call for brotherhood, for peaceful coexistence between human and mutants? Not at all, Lila. But if mankind waited for the right time to address the winds of change, it's unlikely we'd ever have crawled from the primordial ooze. Okay, so Professor X getting ready to deliver a big humanist plea for toleration. But what's going on beneath the stage? We've got some schemers underneath the stage who are setting explosives to blow up the whole affair. But who's here? Apparently it's Cable. And he says to these characters as he blows them away, I've got first dibs on Professor X. If it means anything, I may take a little longer, but he'll be just as dead. Okay, so what is going on? Even as he stands on their skull, on the skull of one of them. So here's our title of the story, Overture. So it is X-Cutioner's song. So this is the Overture, the first issue, chapter 1 of 12. And who's our creative team? Scott Lobdell, writer. Brandon Peterson, penciler. Terry Austin, inker. Chris Eliopoulos, letterer. So we haven't had Eliopoulos on the title before. This is his first issue. Mike Thomas, colorist. We haven't had him on the title before. And then, of course, Bob Harris, editor. So interesting combination of Austin and Peterson here. And I like it. I like the evocation of that original John Byrne era and also the Art Adams issue, or well, annuals and specials. And then we switch scene to Salem Center and Harry's Hideaway, or as the narrative caption says, the students of Charles Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, however, have dubbed it the Danger Pub. So we've got Scott there. Last scene, actually, Harry's Hideaway, last scene in the title, back in Uncanny X-Men 270, the first part of Extinction Agenda. So I wonder, is this a deliberate chiming resonance with the first part of Extinction Agenda? So we've got Scott here at the booth in the pub, and he's looking at this advertisement for Pabst brew, and he imagines the hot girl with the beer to be none other than Psylocke. All my friends are X-Men, he thinks. All my loves are. And then Jean interrupts as she comes out of the bathroom, and she says she's back. And Scott is off on his loved up daydream, and Jean is disgusted. You're thinking about her again. So this is all this subplot going back to Jim Lee's tenure on Adjectiveless X-Men, where he was setting up some kind of tension there between, or a love triangle between Scott, Jean, and Psylocke. But Scott basically says, I'm thinking of you, Jean. I'm always thinking of you. Good thinking, Scott. Get in there with your denial. And he thinks to himself, don't lie to a telepath, it's demeaning. Or rather, she thinks to him, back to him. I like this. I like the reflection in the window of the pub, and we see like the ShopRite here coming through, and that's where Iceman and Colossus are in their human forms, and they're doing a spot of shopping. And we've got a bit of characterization going on here where Iceman says to Colossus, Pete, you and I don't have a lot of history between us, but if, and Colossus fills in, but if I'd like to pour out my heart out about my brother's suicide, you'll listen? Thank you, no. My grief, my shame is a private matter. So Colossus being stoical here in this issue. And then we switch back to Central Park, and Gambit and Storm are there. And this is a nice little bit of picking up on previous continuity and previous issues. Of course, D.H. Storm being rescued by Gambit in his first appearance, Uncanny X-Men 266. and we really haven't seen much of them together and kind of dialoguing together since like before Extinction Agenda. So that gets picked up on here, and a little bit about the fact that, you know, Forge has broken up with Ororo, and Gambit here using, you know, like his affectionate, but she doesn't like it term, Stormy, for her, and she gets angry and says, if you keep calling me, but he grabs her arm and he says to her, even as he starts waltzing with her, death threats and dancing, très chic. This is rock music, Remy. Why are we waltzing? Cause, Ororo, it's the only dance step this Cajun knows. And then she's smiling and laughing there. So this is interesting because, you know, that's part of Gambit's character. He is this Don Juan character. He's a Casanova character. He's a charmer. He's a seducer. And he brings that lightness, or that ought to be part of his characterization, that he brings lightness, like romantic lightness, to the X-Books. And here he is charming Ororo out of her, you know, like her kind of seriousness in this little scene. So I like it. And nice art by Peterson and Austin as well. And then, because it's a crossover, we have a scene with a few members of X Factor here. We've got Guido, we've got Multiple Man, and we have got also Quicksilver. So they're staying at the Grand Hyatt in Manhattan, and they're watching the TV. And there's a bit of comic business here, and they're going to show up later in the crossover, of course. So we'll continue. We go back to Harry's Hideaway, the Danger Pub, and this little bit of a hiccup in the relationship between Scott and Jean. But Scott makes a good case for himself, and he seals it with a kiss here. But it's interrupted by Caliban, who really appreciates this true love clinch between Scott and Jean. And he hates true love. Caliban, rejected by Kitty Pryde, of course, didn't go through with the wedding. And so here he is. And Caliban, since then, has become one of Apocalypse's horsemen. But then we switch back to Central Park, and we've got Lila rocking out on the stage, and New York appreciating her. And then, just a little bit like Bono and U2, she brings out, you know, our very serious humanist person, Professor X, here to give a speech. And as she says here, the world's foremost expert on the world's most feared and hated minority. So he's going to give a speech as the crowd realizes about mutants. That Lila, always pushing the envelope. Give him a chance, let him speak. So the crowd is divided in terms of listening to Professor X, giving his little sermon about, you know, brotherhood and tolerance. And here we have this guy in his trench coat. It is the 90s. You believe this? He asks rhetorically. Shoot the mutant-loving gimp. And the chair he rode in on. And Cable, as it seems, punches him into a wall. Shush, it's rare that a man has the opportunity to deliver his own eulogy. So what is going to happen with Professor X? So then we switch back to Salem Center, and here's Colossus and Iceman pushing their shopping trolleys out into the parking lot. And then they realize something's amiss in Harry's Hideaway. So they transform into their action forms. Colossus, Iceman. Nice visual here by Peterson and Austin. And let's continue and see what happens next. So, it's complicated by the arrival of war and famine. So Apocalypse's other horsemen. So Caliban at this point is Apocalypse's horseman of death. So here we've got war, we've got famine arriving in, and so the whole thing is complicated now. Nice little reference here to Wills Portacio's device of the jagged edged panel border. And then we're back in Central Park with Professor X's big humanist speech. He starts off here with these insults: freak, flat scan, dead end, gene joke, beauty, words powerful, words meant to distance, to demean, to destroy the havens of self-respect we each carry and nurture within us. Just as surely as they seek to rend the centuries-old tapestry we, as a race, have agreed to call civilization. So it's a big speech, and it meets a very mixed response, even maybe a hostile response. This guy here saying, no family I know got scales growing on their faces. Charlotte and Warren disgusted, disappointed by the reaction of the crowd, throwing beer cans at Professor X. Now, turn the page, what happens? Ba-bram, as the sound effects makes plain. And Professor X is shot in the chest, it seems. Look at the blood emerging from his nose and mouth. And this guy here with his big 90s trench coat, holy, someone shot Professor Xavier. Who does it appear to be? Cable. Not just anyone, pal. The name is Cable, but the world will know me as the man who saved tomorrow. So, pretty dramatic moment as the first chapter of this crossover. Then we're back to Harry's Hideaway, and we've got Scott and Jean taking on Caliban here, but he is emotionally charged as Jean communicates telepathically to Scott. Can barely hold him in a telekinetic grip. So what are they going to do here in this dire situation? Well, as it turns out, they are in a bit of a pickle, in a tight corner, because as he announces, he's death. But outside, Iceman and Colossus are making some, they're gaining against war and famine in particular, because famine has miscalculated, because she's tried to use her powers on Colossus, but when he's in his armored form, he doesn't need food, so it backfires on her. And so they're squaring off against each other here. Let's continue. And then we switch back to Central Park. And Charlotte realizes that Warren has been using an image inducer all along. And his wings protrude out of the back of his suit. And he's gunning for Cable now. And he says here, we should have taken you down after you shanghaied your first New Mutant. So we've got a pickup here of some narrative threads and themes that haven't really gotten addressed in the X titles. But it began with Extinction Agenda, where the X-Men were butting up against Cable in the first issue, Uncanny X-Men 270, when they were vying for who should have the use of the Danger Room. And here it is, like everything is coming home now to, the chickens are coming home to roost. So Warren, this charter X-Man, original X-Man, like going up against Cable, as he says here, we should have taken you down after you shanghaied your first New Mutant. But the Professor believed they'd come to their senses on their own. And then Cable, quote unquote, says, not his first mistake, Archangel, guarantee it's his last. That's very Claremontian dialogue there. And he shoots Archangel right through one of his wings. And so here's Lila looking to assist Professor X on the stage. And we've got Storm, we've got Bishop arriving on the stage. So everything is happening in split seconds. And Professor X seems to be dying here. as Lila shouts, "Oh God, Storm, Bishop, we're losing him." And Cable, quote unquote, says, "Well, you've already lost him. You just don't realize it yet." Body slide by one, he slides away, even as Warren is sending those knives right at Cable. Too late. And then we switch scene to New Mexico, where X-Force are based currently, temporarily. And we've got Sam Cannonball at a monitor screen, and he's trying to get it up and running to show them what's going on in the world. And he finally gets it to work, and they just tune in time to get the news report from Trish Tilby, the Beast's girlfriend from X Factor, that Professor X moments ago has been shot by an unidentified assailant, but we've got him here on screen. And of course X-Force recognize him, or they recognize the image of this assailant as being Cable. And so we are told that noted geneticist and would-be mutant rights activist Professor X, Professor Xavier, may or may not have survived an assassination attempt on his life by, well, who is it? This is the question raised by this particular issue. So we're told by the narrative captions, the sound kicks out, silence is deafening, yet if they listen closely, these mutants, indeed, every mutant on the face of the earth, might hear the faint strands of music just beyond the horizon. The X-Cutioner's song has begun. So readers of X-Force would know by this point from New Mutants 100 that there is a visual similarity between Cable and Strife. So we're being teased here with the question of, was it Cable who shot Professor X, and if so, why? And if it was Strife, well, you know, what is going on? What's the big, grand villain scheme? So here we are. Switch off Cerebro, dry dock the Blackbird, lock the Danger Room door. From here on, it's Manic Mutant Mania in the Mighty Marvel manner, as we continue what we're betting is the hottest crossover ever. So X Factor number 84 is the next issue in the crossover. So there we go. We've got a dramatic opening to X-Cutioner's song where Professor X is assassinated in Central Park. And the mystery has begun in terms of who done it, Cable or Strife. So I do hope you enjoyed this video review and commentary on Uncanny X-Men 294. If you did like it, please do like the video. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.